Hello, and thanks for joining us on the podcast that discusses all things gaming. Coming to you from the home of Gen Con and the gaming capital of the world, this is The Established Facts. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of The Established Facts. This is your host, Big Don, and I would like to welcome you all. We are going to take a short suspension of our Archetype series that we've been running on, as many of you have gotten a chance to enjoy that. We are going to deviate just slightly for an episode or two to kind of bring you some really fun limited opportunity episodes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our introductions, starting...
Hi, this is Princess Katie.
Hey, this is Derek.
Riger, a.k.a. Jeremy.
This is Josh.
This is Prime.
And newly back from Tampa.
This is Anton.
And we do have a really special guest here on the Established Facts, and I will go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Hey, my name is Dan, and I am from the Fear the Boot podcast, which you can find at feartheboot.com. And we're also proudly moving towards Fear the Con 6 coming up here at the top of May, which you can find at fearthecon.com. And I want to thank you guys at the Established Facts for letting me come on here and establish myself.
Hey, not a problem. We're glad that you got a chance to join us and have some fun with us. I think many of us on the Established Facts are going to be joining you guys over there in... It's just outside of St. Louis. What is it?
It's in St. Louis County.
Okay.
A lot of people, when they think of St. Louis, think of St. Louis City. This is actually St. Louis County.
Okay.
So,
But yeah, I hear awesome things, and I'm excited to see what happens this year at Fear the Con 6. And the if you are going, Thursday night is the Worldwide Wing Night. Is that correct?
that's correct, sir.
All right, there you go. Wings and beer and all
And then
kinds
you
of
have
merriment.
2
sounds
days
beautiful.
of amazing gaming.
That's right.
And, yeah.
Are we not going to throw out what it was last year? The best 2 gays in Daming, if you remember Mikey Mason
gosh.
screwing that up.
Yeah,
The best two gays in gaming.
Oh, in Daming.
gays in Daming, because we were
Gays in
talking.
Daming.
Yeah, that was all Mikey Mason.
Yes, he couldn't for the life of him get the phrase out. So just the best 2 gays in Daming. Really?
You need 2 homosexuals to set you up on a hetero date with the best 2 gays in gaming.
Well, fortunately, you're halfway there. So,
You see, something like that ends up on the TLC network, and people are like, did that show just happen?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Anyways,
Moving on.
Yeah, so on this episode...
Structure.
Yeah, right. We're going to...
apparently, this is a very special episode.
No, we're just...
According to you.
I'm just really excited about having Dan on here,
Oh, yeah, me
because
too, yeah.
we don't get a whole lot of... We get some special people on here, but we
me.
don't get a whole lot of special guests. So, the Established
Hello,
Facts
extra
is...
special people.
That's right.
I brought my helmet.
So we are going to get right into our versus topic. Just to give you an intro, we're going to be discussing independent RPG games versus mass-marketed RPG games. And what I mean by that is something like Fiasco. I would consider to be more on the independent circuit. It's a smaller game. It's a little less known. It's an up and coming game by all means, but it's definitely something that it's the new kid on the block when it comes to RPGs and things like that. Weird West is another great example of that. It's a newer, smaller RPG with a little bit different scope of things that a lot of us are used to. Whereas something like Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, Paizo's Pathfinder, and even Dark Heresy.
Or Savage Worlds.
Savage Worlds, yeah, absolutely. Iron Kingdoms, things like that. They're a little bit more mass-produced. They're a lot better known, and they're definitely something that if you walked into your friendly local game store, you would see almost right away. Whereas the other independent games you might see at your local game store, but it may take a little bit more research, and you might need to actually know what you're looking for before you find it. So, without further ado, we will start with our newly returned podcaster, Anton, and indie games versus mass market.
I'm going to start off by getting smited. Sitting on the fence.
Oh.
And I just wanted to explain this just shortly. It depends on the length of play. For just kind of having a game night, playing a game, being done with it, independent games. And then for games that are going to last for months and months and months is where I want the more corporate games.
Prime?
I'm going to go with mass market.
Joshy?
I'm going to have to go with mass market right now as well.
All right, Mr. Ragar?
I'm going to sell out and go corporate.
Derek?
I'm going to say playing would be mass market, running would be indie.
So you're on the fence.
No, we had. I am not on the fence.
I know,
sir.
I know.
I'm on the
we
fence.
had a kind of a side decision that if you are a GM of any kind or have GM'd, basically what you would prefer to run versus what you would prefer to play. So, Katie,
I was falling within the parameters. Thank you very
that's
much.
true.
Don.
That's true. Absolutely.
I also am going to have to join the consensus and say mass market.
Oh man. All right, Dan.
I'm going to come in strong on the other side and say the smaller games.
All right. And I, too, am going to have to agree with Dan that when it comes to my experiences in a lot of the newer indie games, I just have... I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder for a long time, and though I love to play them, I think that these newer indie games... kind of bring a different scope and a different viewpoint on RPGs, and I think I enjoy them a little bit more than what the mass-produced. Now, for me, I'm kind of the opposite of Derek. I enjoy running the mass-produced stuff because it's so easy to get material that for somebody who is a newer GM or just wants to run something that is easily accessible.
It's also friendly for the players.
Right, absolutely. Then mass marketed stuff is a little bit nicer. So
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I've already moved beyond that. So, man, I'm on the advanced sort of pre-doctorate level of GMing. So,
oh
man,
well, I'm sorry.
You
I'm
guys
still working
the,
on my bachelor
on the bachelor's level. I mean,
Jeez. So Dan, kind of give us a little bit of insight on what really turns you on when it comes to indie RPGs.
Let me frame my answer by saying that it's not a dogmatic answer. I don't have some kind of really strong view where it's like I won't play a mass market game. I have played it and very much enjoyed Pathfinder, D&D, World of Darkness, all that stuff. I think they're great games. I have absolutely really nothing against them. The reason that, given the two options, I went with the indie game, I think really boils down to two reasons. The first is with the mass market games, there's a lot of established material, depending on the game. There's typically a lot of established material, which I feel like limits my creativity. Yes, I can eject the canon, but if you're going to play Star Wars or Forgotten Realms or whatever the case is, people come into that expecting a certain list of things to be true, and you don't necessarily know what the sacred cows are to each and individual person coming to the table. And so there's a host of canon that you have to stick to that may kind of limit where you take the game. The second thing that I would say is that there's a level of intimidation, because as someone who likes to play a lot of different games, if I was to walk into a group and say, well, I'm going to run Forgotten Realms, for example, but because I play so many games, I don't know Forgotten Realms inside and out. I haven't read every single source book and splat book and novel and whatever, and so my knowledge of the Forgotten Realms is really limited to a pretty small area, and there's a certain level of intimidation that if somebody comes along that knows more about the setting than I do, they can run roughshod over me. And these are not absolute truths. I mean, once again, you can certainly say, look, I'm going to run it my way. We're only going to have a certain degree of canon. But it was this sort of slight imbalance that I went with as my decision-making factor to go with the independent game, because it lets me move between settings and systems a lot more fluidly without having the baggage of a lot of canon to have to know or to be hit with by someone who knows the setting better than I do. I think I also picked indie because I'm a big lover of homebrews. I both like playing and creating homebrews, and these aren't ones you could get anywhere. Certainly not in your FLGS or at Walmart or Target or whatever. And so I fall on the indie side for that reason as well.
All right. Josh, tell us a little bit about why you like mass market games over indie games.
A lot of this comes for me as a player, as a game master. I have to agree with what Don, you mentioned with the idea that there's a lot of source material to grab from, because I'm still that beginning game master who's run 1 year-long campaign. Don't give me the rolled eyes like you're higher minded than I am. I have to establish a history in your world. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
Anyways, as a player, though, I've only really the majority of my experience has been in the mass market, and it's for me, it's allowed me to see different sides of the creative mind that I do have, even though I may work as an engineer, I may even have a bachelor's degree in engineering, but at heart, I'm a creative person. I'm a musician, a gamer.
Yeah, that's where your master's is, isn't it?
That's where my master's went, because I wanted to throw $30,000 at something I won't get paid to do. See, I've recorded a podcast.
Yeah.
But for me, that kind of was that I was able to enter worlds that were established. And for me, being a video game player especially, it's really easy for me to get lost in a video game because it's all in front of us. It's all been established. They have all this canon that's being created. And then with a mass market game, because a lot of the world is normally created, it was a lot easier to get wrapped up in. With Danielle's game of Iota Dree and now your game of Pelagane, though, I'm able to look at this and go, so you can create your own worlds even using the mass market systems. And that's where I am stepping into my next years of collegiate study as a GM, I guess. Since those are the references. Yeah, is learning to see that the creative worlds, though as established as they may be, as Dan mentioned, you can establish your own using the mass market systems. Just sometimes you have to, finagle the standards, like Drow being able to see up on the surface with a pair of sunglasses instead of
having light sensitivity. Like
exactly.
Right. And I think it's worth mentioning that there is a split there between the mass market system and the mass market setting. For example, you can take something like the Fate system or Savage Worlds, which are readily available. I mean, obviously, they're not quite on the same level something like, D&D is, but nonetheless, they're readily available. But that's really more of a system that invites you to create your own setting. And so I kind of had to roll the two together in making my answer. And I also think that one of the knocks against the smaller games, especially the homebrews, is players very frequently say, well, I don't get this setting. It'd be a lot easier for me if I could look at a list of skills, look at a list of races, flip through it, look at some of the art, and get a sense of what it's all about. And depending on exactly how independent or small this game is, that material may not be readily available to them. And so they're going to have a little bit more trouble locking in. But on the flip side, if they're a newer player, that can also overwhelm them. I found that groups that prefer larger games, not always, this is not always the case, but just kind of my experience has been, they also tend to have their game. We are a D&D group. We are a BattleTech group. We are whatever it is. And they really get deep into that game, and somebody new comes in, and everybody there is throwing around jargon and throwing around proper nouns and throwing around places and throwing around people, and these people just have no freaking clue what they are talking about and feel hey, man, wow, not only am I new to role playing, but I don't get a single thing that's being said at this table. And it's very intimidating to them, or can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in that same, I've heard lots of stories about just in general how sometimes just walking into, say, a game store for somebody who might be new to the hobby and really excited about checking out the new stuff, if they just got in, no matter what game it is, but, definitely in this case, role-playing, if you just got into a gaming group that plays Pathfinder or plays D&D and you want to look for someone to play with as well as kind of a supplement, we run, for the most part, here at the Established Facts, most of us run like one game a month. And so for those other 3 weeks, if you wanted to play something different somewhere else, you might look for another party or another game group to join. And it can be intimidating in general, just walking into like your friendly local game store and kind of getting the cold shoulder from people who, obviously you don't understand. When somebody's throwing around, hey, can you throw me the Ultimate Equipment Guide, and can you hand me the core, and hey, do you have which bestiary do you have, or what is what book is the Drow out of, or the Dampier, and you're like, what the hell are these people saying? Like,
yeah, it's like, can you hand me the DMG and the
right
PHB,
PHB. Right? Yeah.
But I mean, it's also, I would imagine it's intimidating for people to just walk into a gaming store.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, even if you're not there for role playing, if you're there to pick up like minis, like a miniature combat or anything like that, I mean, you're immediately looked at with, Josh, what are you doing?
Sorry.
You're immediately looked at with suspicion when you're walking in there.
Yeah.
I mean, as well as our hobby has expanded, I mean, I'm sure that turns away a lot of people.
Yeah, and there's
I can
still
attest
a lot of,
to that,
Yeah.
being a new gamer and not having done much gaming before I started hanging out with this group. Like every time I go into the game store by my house, I'm like, hey guys, I'm
Right.
just here to get some dice. Don't crucify me. I'll be gone in 2 seconds. Like, because they're the people that are just like, what's she doing here? That girl's not here all the time. She's not a gamer. What's she doing?
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's probably what it is.
Well, and this is something that I've heard a lot of people say, and in a gaming group, in an intimate setting, I mean, I can imagine, Katie, you just recently started gaming with a lot of us, and I can imagine that the first couple times that you showed up for a game, it was probably fairly intimidating, especially maybe the first time. You're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what these people are talking about. I don't even know what I'm getting into, But I think that, to me, it can be, just like we said, it can be even more intimidating to to branch out and start looking for things on your own, because just like any sort of team sport or any sort of small knit community, you have your comfort levels among all your friends, but when you try and branch out to maybe network with other people, unless you have a very outspoken, boisterous attitude, it can be very difficult. And I know, Dan, you've talked about on Fear the Boot that you have, definitely some anxiety issues when it comes to certain things like that. And I can imagine trying to get into a larger group of gamers can be nerve-wracking, just in general. Just not even like, we're not even talking about a con or anything like that. Just walking into your local game store on a Friday night Magic night when there's 75 people in there or something.
But how can the use of a game system, whether it be corporate or independent, help break down those walls?
You do it in steps.
Okay, so we've turned gaming into a 12-step program?
Yes, we have. And the first step is to admit that you have a problem.
Do I get a token at the end?
Yes, you do. And you can
a
spend your
D20.
tokens.
It's a deep. Oh, geez.
Oh. When you end up, you have the full set. It's really, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot since I talked to my aunt and my mom about what I do as a hobby. And I talked a little bit about, I think, last night on
Dice bags.
Dice bags, yeah. Sorry, I had way too much gin last night. So it's when you're talking to someone who is not in the know, it's you play a role-playing game. Okay, first question, how do you win the game? And the second, and when you say, okay, no, it's not like that. You're telling a story, and it seems like they get hung up on the terminology of game versus, okay, you're telling an interactive story. And then you have to also work with the fact that to get like the stuff you need for Pathfinder, or to get the stuff you need for most of these other games like D10s, D20s. I mean, this is all stuff, yeah, you can buy it online, but you would have to know where to get it and that sort of thing. But you would typically go into a gaming hobby store, and then you get that reaction of, okay, who's this dude?
It's very exclusive.
It really is. So my hypothesis that I currently am running under is that if you can eliminate the terminology, and if you can eliminate the need to go into such a specialized store, then maybe you can actually evangelize this for a broader range of people. So hence my universal storytelling system, which uses a deck of cards. And it's, I try to use as I try not to use gamer jargon when in the text, because I want people to say, okay, this is what you're actually doing. Okay, you're not putting on a cloak, going into your mother's basement, and like rolling and like drawing pentagrams or something crazy like that. And which apparently, like, we had another incident of somebody doing something absurdly stupid.
Something else I'd like to add to this, in the sense of breaking down these walls, is look at the Neverwinter Nights system, the video game, the PC game rather. There was a mod kit or a developer kit that was bundled with that, and you could create your own stories using the Neverwinter Nights engine.
That's cool.
Which are D&D based.
And is still running quite popularly today. They're still doing stuff like that.
Well, and I think before we move into our discussion, kind of getting back into our versus topic, I think that's probably one of the biggest. I have noticed, and this may just be because my eye is more on it than it has been in the past, but I have noticed that there's been a large influx of a lot of like homebrews and a lot of independent games and a lot of independent game makers that are trying to get new stuff out to people who have experience with gaming and have experience with role playing, and that could be the impetus of it. Maybe they're tired of people feeling like they have to go to a specific store to get a specific thing just so they can play this game. Instead, they're
Think about
encouraging.
Dread. I mean,
yeah,
Dread,
absolutely.
all you need is a Jenga, which
A
you
Jenga
can go
tower.
into
A Jenga
like
tower.
Walmart and
Yeah,
get a Jenga
absolutely.
tower. I mean, and speaking on that, I mean, I have GM-itis where I have like an entire like shelf of game systems that I have never touched.
Yeah.
So, like, we were talking last night, Don and I were talking, like, Don was like, yeah, I'd like to play some of those random systems.
Yeah,
like,
even if
I've
it's
got
just
an
one-shots.
entire shelf of them. I would love to run them. But it's like we get stuck in these ruts, and I know that Fear the Boot has talked about this a number of times.
I have to wonder sometimes, though, if we, as the people inside of the hobby, misunderstand what it is the people outside of the hobby actually misunderstand. I mean, yes, there are some people that are still caught up in that moral panic of the 1980s, where, and for those people, the best recommendation I can give is don't tell them what a role-playing game is, ask them a lot of questions. When they say, well, what do you do? Ask them, well, what do you think a role-playing game is? Well, it's D&D. Okay, well, what do you think D&D is? What do you think we actually do? And that gives you a pretty good starting point to understand what they've got right and what they've got wrong and start tearing that down. But if you look at the market that's a little more in the know, I think it's actually bigger than most people estimate it to be. And this was a point that was made to me by, I don't want to quote a name because I can't remember it, somebody in the industry who said to me that they have decided to stop including much of anything in terms of an intro to RPGs at the front of their books. And the reason that they're doing this is because they found, if nothing else, through electronic RPGs, because of things like Neverwinter Nights, Mass Effect, whatever, that the basic idea that you are somebody else in a moderated story has become a fairly universal concept. Most people get that. Now, they may not get some of the details, and that's where I think you start to get into, do you go with an indie or do you go with a mass market? And I really have to agree with whoever it was that said that the is in some ways like a 12-step program. I mean, the issue here is that it's not the game itself. Success versus obscurity does not make a game more or less approachable. It ultimately comes down to the group. I can take a very established game, and if you sit down and I back way off and keep it simple, start you in a small area and ease you into the ideas, you can get it. As opposed to if I drop a rule book, a setting book, 3 splat books, and 20 novels, push them across the table and say, this is what everyone else knows, catch up. You're going to get a very different response. And I can do the exact same thing with an indie game. I can take an indie game and say, on the one hand, hey, look, it's easy. It's just one book. Once you've read this, it's a 50-page book. It's a quick read, lots of pictures. You'll do it in an hour or two, and you'll be caught up. Or we could just start throwing all these esoteric concepts at them and thumbing our nose, and they walk out of there as ostracized as when they came in.
Yeah.
And so I don't per se want to draw this false dilemma that the size or success of a game ultimately sets its approachability, but I think it certainly does create a perception of approachability. If there's a single book versus a stack of books, if there's a small amount of jargon versus hundreds of proper nouns that these people have to get used to.
Well, and I definitely agree with that, and I also think, and this is coming from someone who can definitely be very social, and there are very few times in my life when I've walked into a room and met a stranger. I think that what a good gaming group, a good game store, just a good group of people who like to play games together, what you kind of need is if you know that you have people who have friends who want to get into gaming, maybe have that spokesperson who is charismatic and they're open and they're honest and they're at least willing to sit down and kind of address those concerns while everybody else kind of gets ready for the new person to come in. That way you don't have someone walking in completely blind to the fact that of what they're doing, because I think that sometimes you can also have a little bit of resistance from the group when a new person walks in, but if you walk in with someone who they know, then it's like, oh, okay, well, obviously they know Dan, so they're going to be cool. Go ahead, Anton.
For me, it plays off what you were saying, plays off what he was saying. The reason why I'm a lot on the fence is because, the reason I was saying I'm a lot on the fence is because for your independent games, the pickup time from when you get the game to when you play the game typically is a lot faster. In general consensus is with a lot of the independent games, they're quick to start, they're quick to run through, and for me and the experiences that I've had with them, it's a blazing amount of fun, and it's great for small night events. Where your larger systems, you have a lot more options, a lot more detail, a lot more time and effort is put into building your characters for those. That's why I typically want the more built, more enterprise or corporate systems for those types of games, because I'm going to be putting a lot more investment into building the character that I'm going to be playing for a long period of time. A lot of what you were saying a minute ago.
This is building off of what Dan said. Actually, being a newer gamer, I feel the opposite about more established games with all the canon, all the books and stuff, because I'm one of those people, I love to research things, I love to dig into stuff, and so for me, larger systems, that have a lot more established backgrounds and, all these other things, I like that as opposed to, well, here's one book, make up your own stuff. I want to be like, oh, well, I'm going to pick this deity for this reason, or, you know what I mean? I like having all those other options in front of me. So I personally prefer, as a newer gamer, the larger games like that, because it gives me more to work with when I'm creating my character and it's not all on me.
Sure, and I think something you've just hit on is what is probably one of the biggest lies told by role players, which is somebody says, well, what can I be? And you say, well, you can be anything. Well, no, you can't. There may be a lot of things you can be, but there are going to be certain things that are not going to fit in the setting, are not going to be useful to the... Yeah, exactly.
Derek.
I want to be a super angel. We're playing Mouse Guard, and it's kind of like, what? And it's And so I think it can certainly help with a newer player to say, okay, you don't have to make it up yourself and really not know the parameters of the universe while doing so. Instead, here's a list of 10 or 20 options, and if you pick from those, and you can kind of look through those and read the descriptions and work out the pluses and minuses in your mind, and you've got something to go off of. And as I said earlier, that's something that a lot of people have kind of pushed back with me on homebrews, and I think rightfully so, as they say, we feel like we're just kind of creating characters blind because we really don't even know what's possible. We don't know what's out there. All of a sudden they come across a technology or a race, and they're like, well, wait, we didn't even know this existed. I would have written my character completely differently if I had known this was there. And so I think that can be helpful, provided it's done in a way that is not too intimidating. Now, I mean, it may be in your case that if I handed you 30 books, you're an avid reader, you love that kind of stuff, and you're going to consume that. But I know, both from experience and from what limited market research has been done of the RPG crowd, that's not true of most players. Most people are willing to sit through one, maybe two books, and these better be short books. I'm not talking these 400-page bullet-stopping tomes, at which point they want to get started. They don't want to sit there and keep reading and keep reading and keep reading, all the while feeling like they're on the outside of what's going on.
Well, I think that's a very good point to kind of end on with our versus topic. I'm pretty sure we could probably talk about this all day and all night. But kind of building off of that, but getting more into our discussion, there are a lot of talking about independent games and mass market games. There's a lot of really cool games, this being March and the spring, that are on the horizon. There's a lot of big game conventions coming up. We talked about Fear the Con 6, Origins, Game Fair, Gen Con. Those are kind of, there's a lot of really fun stuff on the horizon as far as games go. So I really would like to get into kind of a preview of what we are looking forward to as gamers for the spring and summer of 2013. So, Dan, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Sure, and we're talking about indie games here, right? Not just role-playing games?
Yeah, indie games, absolutely.
Indie games coming up. I am very much looking forward to the development of Wasteland 2. I was a big player of Wasteland 1. I've been keeping up with the demo videos and all that they've been putting out. It's certainly a lot more filled with foul language than the original one was, but nonetheless, it looks like a great game, and that's one that, like a lot of people, I have been waiting 30 years, I guess a little less, 25 years now, to happen. So I'm really looking forward to Wasteland 2. I am curious to see how the Numenera successor to Planescape Torment works out. It looks interesting. Planescape Torment's one of those games that I missed out on when it was out, but it got rave reviews and a lot of people loved its flexibility. So I'm really excited to see how that one plays out. In terms of role-playing games, I think the one that I'm the most curious about, and I'm also a backer of it, but I'm curious to see how this plays out, is Fate Kickstarter, is the the Fate Core Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. Because up to this point, Fate has always been applied to a setting of some kind. I mean, I realize with Spirit of the Century it was a little bit more open-ended, but it still presupposed a certain type of game. And I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. I've read the beta rules, which were good. There was a few spots where I thought they were kind of unclear or rough, but I'm not bagging on the guys over at Evil Hat because they even said, this is just a demo working copy. This is not the finished product. And I was at least kind of observing, I wouldn't say party to, but I was observing some of the discussions where they were talking about parts they were working on. So I know it's still in flux, and I'm really eager to see the quick start guide they're putting together. It's going to be like 20 or 30 pages, because I love the feel of Fate, and I think it is great for a lot of games, and a lot of settings and a lot of stories, but it's not finished yet, and so I don't feel I can fairly comment on how it's going to turn out. I'm just excited by the possibility. So those are probably another one I'm looking forward to is Star Citizen. Looks very good. We have not had an open-ended sort of do-your-own-thing flight sim in a long time. And also Elite Dangerous. That's another one like Wasteland. I played the original Elite way back on an Apple IIc, and I'm very much looking forward to Elite Dangerous coming along and picking up where I believe Elite was actually the first sandbox game ever created. And so I'm going to be interested to see how they pick it up with modern technologies. And I'm very pleased to see that they kept a lot of the visuals, despite obviously updating them incredibly. But nonetheless, they're keeping a lot of the visuals and feel of the game in there.
Anton?
Excuse me. For me, it's probably one of the big ones I'm actually looking forward to is Watchdog. And not for what most people would expect. Yes, it's an up-and-coming game. Yes, it's going to be out for the PlayStation 4 or whatever. It really is the fact that that game has no missions. None. Literally, it is you choose how to react in the situations you're presented. And it's not really even situations you're presented. It's you reacting to the environment and the environment reacting to you. And that's how the entire game is played. It's a completely different concept of game that I'm very interested in seeing how it plays out and playing it.
Well, besides the fact that it has become like Ragar's nightmare come true,
Right?
because when I saw that video, the concept that the guy's just walking around and tapping into people's cell phones and analyzing how this person's going to be an 80% victim and that person's going to be 40, 50, 60% criminal, and then deciding whether or not to stop the crime, freaked me out. And I am not the type that's paranoid about that stuff at all. It was just, wow, so let's turn it into a game.
Yeah.
Let's get people used to the idea.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that leads me to another topic that I'm not going into. But I'm also looking forward to, like they mentioned earlier, I just moved back from Tampa, so I'm looking forward to getting into some games. I am very much looking forward to doing a bunch of writing this summer, because I got a bunch of stuff to do for Pallegane. And also just getting my realms that I'm working on fleshed out, written down, and that's going to be a lot of what I'm going to be doing this summer. So,
as far as I'm concerned, I'm not really that versed into the up and coming games, but I know Assassin's Creed 4 is coming out.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
Katie,
Sorry.
really excited.
about
Very. Assassin's Creed and Pirates, two of my most favorite things. Hell yeah.
That's right.
Sorry, Prime, continue.
Suddenly there was a princess in my head and I didn't know what to do.
So you get to play a pirate who kills people like a ninja.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Best of both worlds.
Let's see what else is coming out.
And rides a pony.
Oh yeah. That was a really freaky episode, Dan. By the way, sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead.
talking about ponies, that the first 10 minutes of your last episode, just my head exploded. So
I love
There's
it.
There's a backstory there I'll give very briefly, which is we were sitting at dinner, and I'm going to get the names here wrong, but John just out of nowhere busts out, I want a Pinkie Pie in the streets and a Twilight Sparkle in the sheets, or I don't remember what two ponies he named. I was like, what?
No, I think you got the ponies right. The phrase, I'm not sure, but
Well,
That's the
that was
sad
what he
part.
busted out at dinner. It got rephrased maybe in the episode, but
wow.
Oh goodness.
yes, it was
So,
one
yes.
of those.
Yeah. Assassin's Creed.
Sounds like a good day. Anyways, let's see. I'm looking forward to Assassin's Creed. I don't know if Grand Theft Auto 5 is out now, but
No.
October.
I always like
October. Yeah.
gratuitous violence and that kind of thing. Always
Yeah.
is good. Running over people, things like that. Killing cops apparently.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Jeez. Killing cops and smacking hoes.
That's right. Gotta put them in their place. Anyway, other than that,
Love it.
yeah. Other than that, there's really not much I'm looking forward to. I'm pretty pessimistic. So.
Well,
Okay, Debbie Downer.
I thought we were just going to be talking about spring and summer, but I've already heard Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed. Both are fall things, so I'm just
That's
going
all right.
to continue through the year.
We didn't have a plan. anyway.
The tons of Kickstarters that have been backed and talked about, both the Numenera video game with InXile Entertainment and the Numenera role-playing game, which is due out by the time Gen Con comes around. I'm excited about that. It looks like Tracy Hickman is getting involved with a new video game concept called the Shroud of Avatar: Forsaken Virtues. He is actually going to be the story developer for the video game itself because they are planning to approach role-playing games from a totally different angle. I haven't watched all the videos yet.
From a real role-play standpoint, maybe?
Possibly.
That'd be awesome.
So there's that element of it. As we talked about earlier in our existence, I am a major Sony PlayStation 3 player as it is, excited about the PlayStation 4, and I'm excited about the next Xbox, whatever that may be. I am super excited to see what comes out of that because just the stuff I've heard just sounds like a lot of fun. So, of course, with Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed 4 both planning to come to the next-gen console, I'm excited to see where that goes. But probably more than anything, I'm excited about the Mythic Adventures book coming out at Gen Con from Paizo and Pathfinder with the possible, because we were going to talk about power gaming during the Dice Bags game and that didn't happen, or Dice Bags podcast, and that didn't happen. But many of us have experience playing epic games with D&D, and we want to see what Paizo's first attempt, not necessarily at epic, but a character plus version with the Mythic Adventures
an
is.
Enhanced hero.
So I'm very curious
adventurer.
to see what happens with that.
Which in a spate of just pure brainlessness, I decided that I was going to run next year. So
yes, we're running a whole year campaign with the Mythic Adventures as our back end. So it's going to be entertaining.
Rhaegar?
So Dan actually picked up on a topic that I was really interested in, Wasteland 2. And actually, that kind of a genre of games, the Fallout style games or Deus Ex. So other elements that I'm interested or looking forward to would be VTM Online, Fallout Online, and also the Shadowrun Kickstarter. So those are definitely the big four on my list.
Derek?
There isn't a whole lot because I travel so much, I can't really play video games anymore. Primarily the Fate system that I was a backer of. Numera, I'm very interested to see what's going on there. I'm also interested to see the new set from Universal Fighting System, King of Fighters 13, that's coming out at some point. So pretty much those are the three things, but so yeah, I'm pretty much more in writer mode than consumer mode.
Princess Katie.
Well, I'm sure everybody by now, is well aware of the fact that I am excited for the next Assassin's Creed installment.
No.
Yeah. Judging by my outburst earlier, where I almost had a heart attack.
We all almost had heart attacks.
I don't apologize for that, just so you know. But I am definitely excited for Assassin's Creed 4, and as Prime said, the new Grand Theft Auto and the next Saints Row, because any kind of lawless debauchery is a game I can get behind.
I don't even know when the next Saints Row is coming out.
The month before Grand Theft Auto.
Yep. On purpose.
I'll buy them both.
Okay.
That's why.
I just thought of another one, too.
Well, it's not your turn.
I know.
I'm done with my turn. I'll hand it over to you, Josh.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's it. That's what you had.
I had three. I don't really.
This is a quick one. With the THQ bankruptcy and the splitting off of all their systems or whatever, 2K Sports is taking up the reins on the WWE franchise.
That's right.
And I'm super excited
And
about
anyone who's listened to
WWE
any of our
2K14.
episodes, yeah.
Super excited. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Let's see. Assassin's Creed Black Flag has pretty much been taken. Yeah.
Sorry.
I know that Paizo's got a lot of really cool stuff that's coming out. I know Joss Wheaton, who we don't have on the show.
Can we get him?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I'll put you on that.
Yeah.
Tell us
Josh brought up the Mythic. What is it called again?
Mythic Adventures.
Thank you, Mythic Adventures that Paizo is going to be bringing out. I am also excited about that. I believe they're bringing out a Ultimate Campaign guide as well, which I am.
May 22nd.
I am really excited about as well in May. Other than that, I mean, I love to play Magic, but it's hard for me to keep up with that. So they're bringing out new stuff with that all the time. But Dan, did you have anything else that you are looking forward to?
I got one more I'll throw out there. This is one that actually I was introduced to by Wayne, and I wished I had backed it, but the Kickstarter was over by the time I found out about it. Have you guys heard of a game called Dead State?
No.
No.
Okay. Yeah, what Dead State is about is it's a zombie game, and there are zombie games aplenty. So that right there actually probably would have turned me off to the game because, if you want to play a game where you're walking around trying to shoot zombies and survive, I mean, play Left 4 Dead 2 and you're good.
Right.
But what Dead State is it's more like an RPG where you are managing a survivor society. So you have you and your handful of people that survived, and you're trying to find more survivors and keep them alive and keep them fed. And if so-and-so gets bit, do you set them loose or shoot them or whatever? There's all this kind of moral decision-making. But instead of playing a single guy, you actually are trying to manage a society and keep them together through a zombie apocalypse. And that's an angle that has certainly been played out in TV shows and whatnot, but I don't think I have ever seen attempted in a video game before.
That's an interesting concept.
Yes, it is.
Kind of reminds me of like a Dwarven Fortress meets zombie apocalypse.
I'm thinking like the Stronghold series meets Resident Evil.
Intriguing.
I was kind of more thinking The Sims meets what you actually want to happen in the game.
I did think of one last game that I was looking forward to playing. It's more of looking forward to seeing them finish is Starforge. It is a sandbox construction game. Think of it like Minecraft with in space with endless pits and caverns, and it's basically a space version of Minecraft, but it's quite a bit more different. It has a real-time physics engine.
It's like Railbird Space.
Yeah,
It's
pretty interesting.
Space, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm losing my mind.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting concept. It has terrain deformation from like explosions and stuff, so it's pretty interesting.
So, we are going to move into a small splash topic that I think is going to be kind of fun. For those of you who have been listening to the episode for the entirety of it, Dan introduced himself as, I believe, the creating member of the Fear the Boot podcast, which we are happy to say we are definitely friends with. Now, for those of you who have not gotten a chance to listen to them, I believe they just posted their 294th episode.
Regular episode,
that's correct. They do have a lot of supplemental interviews and bonus episodes, which are hilarious. I think you just had... I would really like to do this on this show. And Dan, I hope that I can take license in doing so eventually, but I just listened to your bonus episode where you did the one-question personality test. Oh my gosh. That was I just cracked up from the beginning to the end of that episode. It was awesome.
No, by all means, that was the point of the episode, was to introduce the game to other people so they would play it.
Yeah,
so,
I definitely think we will have an Established Facts version of the one-question personality test. But anyhow, what I would like to find out from you, kind of more on an interview basis, but not exactly, a lot of us here on the Established Facts are also booters, and we are interested as a young podcast. We're getting ready to record our 50th episode here soon, and celebrate our second year in recording in July. And so we've got a lot of fun things going on here for us, but we really want to know kind of how you guys have been able to pull off the stuff that you've been able to pull off from the inception of Fear the Boot.
Let me start off by giving you a bit of information that I was given when we started Fear the Boot, or it maybe wasn't right at the start, but was not long into it, which is statistically the typical fan endeavor. Okay, so if you decide as a group of buddies you're going to get together and you're going to make a blog, a podcast, a YouTube series, a role-playing game, doesn't matter what it is. This is not a job, it's a hobby. The average lifespan for that kind of an organized endeavor is 12 to 18 months. If you make it beyond 12 to 18 months, you are already beating the odds. And every day that you continue it, you are continuing to defy the odds further and further and further. And if you look at the vast majority of blogs or podcasts, you can see around the 12 to 18 month mark, they start dropping off. And by the time you hit 2-3 years, the vast majority of them, I mean, almost all of them are gone. So this is certainly something anyone who's interested in this type of thing needs to think about, is what the long haul is like. Because it is going to take more in terms of time and effort, energy, and devotion than you ever thought it would. Because you have to keep coming back to it, coming back to it, coming back to it. The question that you asked me before we started recording was where we've come up with the topics. And I gave you the little anecdote that we were actually looking for an escape hatch back in the 20s of our episodes. So somewhere in the middle, I don't remember the exact episode number, somewhere in the middle 20s, because we'd figured we'd said everything there was to say about role-playing games. That's it. We were done. We were out. And so we were looking like, okay, what do we do next? And here we sit now with 294 regular episodes. I guess actually technically 296 because there's episode 0 and then 295 is recorded but not released. About 50 bonus episodes and I think about 20-ish interviews. And here's what we found. There is really no end of things to talk about because the hobby of role-playing games is fundamentally collaborative storytelling. It's collaborative storytelling with an architecture of rules around it. So here's the question. How many stories are there to tell? Now, I know there are some people who can say, well, they subscribe to the theory of the monomyth, or I can't remember who it was, but there was someone else who said that there was only, I mean, heck, an author comes along every few years and says, well, in truth, there's only 5 stories, or 7 stories, or 10 stories, and all of them can be boiled down to one of those. And there may be some truth to that, that sure, if you want to look at it that way, you could strip down a story and say, well, it's going to follow one of these handful of formats. But if you think about the number of characters, the approaches to things, the intricacies of storytelling, I've always thought that that was somewhat of an unfair approach. I always have believed that even if it's true, I mean, think of it this way. Let's look at the Linnaean method of taxonomy. Okay, so how we decide what animals are. Okay, so if you look at humans, you know, kingdom animal, chordata, all the way down to eventually we're Homo sapien. If you look at your dog, it was originally Canis familiaris. They've now changed actually Canis lupus familiaris because of the fact that they have good reason to believe dogs are all descended from wolves. But how many dogs have you met, especially if you've owned a dog, that was just like every other dog? How many people have you met, or once again, if we take out for a moment kind of the sort of misanthropic view of the world, if I'm sick of people in general, whatever, which I realize is fairly prevalent in our subculture. The fact is that every person you meet has a whole lot of nuance and intricacy and uniqueness about them. Mm-hmm. And stories are no different. Because if you think about it, any being you run into, any person you talk to, any dog that you interact with, is some combination of nature and nurture. They are, in a sense, their own ongoing story. And what we quickly found was that the best source for discussion topics was our own games. Because what we would find is we'd be sitting there with a whiteboard, or we'd be sitting there in the back area of our forums being like, okay, let's come up with some role-playing topics. And maybe there's something that a listener said that'd be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. Or maybe one of us just off the top of our head just kind of, freewheeling, we'd come up with an idea. But those lists were typically pretty short. And oftentimes were very tortured. And the topics, some of them worked, some of them weren't going to work. And it really never got very far. But what we found is as we sat there and gamed, we just started looking at the things that were coming up in our own games. And what we found is because of the diversity of the stories and the diversity of the people involved, all being put up against these different scenarios, that we just started seeing one after another all these different angles that started popping up of how things go down. You know, the episode that we just released was on forced success. When do you as a game master have to force your party to succeed to move the plot forward? Well, that came out of a specific incident in a game. Now, we'd seen it before, but that brought it back to mind. The episode that we're about to release is the opposite side of the coin, which is the usefulness of failure, which once again came from a story in our current ongoing game. Because I think we just take certain things for granted. You look at a story and you kind of consume it, but you really don't always sit back and dissect all the things that were going on there emotionally or socially or technically. And once you start looking at it with that eye, presuming you don't take such a cynical approach that you say, well, it's really all about the same. It's just a great big hum. If you actually keep a mind that is excited by the hobby, that is fascinated by the hobby, there is an incredible amount of complexity and balancing that goes on. There are so many individual choices that we're forced to make. Now, I hate to make predictions about the future. You know, I don't know what computing will one day be capable of, but what I can tell you right here and right now is the reason that I love role-playing games is because of the fact that humans can react to those kinds of stories. We can create those stories, tell those stories, and moderate those stories. A video game can't. You know, you have a dialogue tree. You have a set number of actions. I don't know how many times I've been playing a video game and being like, wow, why don't I just climb over that? Or why don't I just set this on fire so it's not in my way anymore? And a video game doesn't have to deal with that. You have a set number of possible ways of approaching any situation, and sure, it's a large number of possibilities, especially if you look at a fairly complicated game like Mass Effect, for example. But it's still a pretty finite series of possibilities. But in a role-playing game, everybody's emotions, everybody's take on characters, everybody's take on the world, all comes to play. And then you get the rules aspects. You know, there's all these ways of, well, the rules in a way kind of tell a part of the story, and they create a certain sort of feel. And then you start to go to the stories behind the stories. Well, who are the people that created this stuff? And why did they create it the way they did? Why did they choose to tell this kind of story? What fascinated them about that? Why did they choose to do the rules this way instead of that way? And what does that really say about their view of storytelling, their view of the consumers? And as we kept going, I can't tell you how many times, I mean, the first one being somewhere in the 20s, but we had countless points where we came back to the audience, and anyone that knows our show has heard these, where we said, wow, yeah, we really don't know if we can keep this going. We've got to kind of reinvent how we're doing it. We got to think about spinning off a separate show or something like that that does a radically different approach. And for every one of those conversations we had on the air, there was probably a dozen off the air. And every time what we found is, yeah, we'd hit this point where we just didn't see what to do next, but we would just kind of stick in there, and sure enough, something would happen in the next game or whatnot that would inspire us to move forward. And what I would say to anyone who's doing this kind of thing is you've got to approach the hobby with that kind of an open mind, and you've got to just stop and look at the world around you and kind of think about its complexity. And these topics will just jump out at you. But even if you're not into that, let's say you're just purely a consumer, you've got no interest in making your own podcast, blog, game, whatever, you just like playing it, then here's the challenge that I would give to you. Look at what you are doing and take a few moments to just kind of mentally deconstruct it. You would be surprised to see how intricate your hobby really is and how deep so much of it is, that what to us we just kind of take as, well, yeah, we just throw some dice and tell some stories and kill some goblins or aliens or whatever the game allows for. But there is so much more going on there.
All right.
Okay.
That was awesome. I think that, here on the Established Facts, that's definitely something that we try and appreciate, is definitely the time that we have to game with each other and to kind of experience what each individual personality brings to the table. And I did not realize that there was a statistic out there for 12 to 18 months. I figured it probably wasn't very long, but it's kind of encouraging to also look at it and say, well, Obviously
We
we're,
just broke that hurdle.
yeah.
We just broke the 18-month hurdle.
and we're also, a lot of us listen to other podcasts, and a lot of the podcasts that we've listened to, we were on, Josh and Derek and I recorded with Kicked in the Dice Bags before we sat down to record this episode, and they just hit 50 episodes, and Chris Mays was on the episode talking about how they were going to be revamping the Mastercast because he just couldn't get enough people when on a regular basis when they wanted to record to be able to actually sit down and do that. And so it's really kind of interesting to see people who obviously have experience in one capacity still not be able to have the full experience that they want out of the hobby that they are trying to put out there for people.
But I think there's a larger point that and I'm going to try not to speak for Dan because he's like right here ish is that he was making is that our hobby has so much involved with it that we just don't really think about,
take the time to observe
actively
it. Yeah.
think about.
Absolutely.
And I think a great place to look to for inspiration in that regard is comic books. Because of the surge in interest in comic book characters, mostly brought about by the comic book movies, there have been so many different deconstructions of the comic book story. Just to give you a couple examples, the History Channel did a study on the technology of Batman right about the time that The Dark Knight was coming out. They also did another special where they brought in a bunch of psychologists and sociologists and dissected all the characters and the way they clash, where you have Batman who's looking for justice in the form of order, the Joker who's looking for justice in the form of chaos, and Harvey Dent who's looking for justice in the form of fairness. And they broke down, all the kind of distinctions between these characters. If you saw the movie Kill Bill, and I'm not a huge Quentin Tarantino fan, but there's a scene near the end of Kill Bill Volume 2 that I really liked, where who was the play bad guy? Was it Christopher Walken? Who was the play actually played
Carradine.
Bill? David Carradine,
Carradine.
that's who. Right, David Carradine, where he deconstructs Superman, and he says that the difference between Superman and almost every other superhero out there is Bruce Wayne becomes Batman. Okay, and we can say this about most superheroes. A guy becomes a superhero, but Superman is the reverse. Clark Kent is the false identity. Superman is who he really is.
Yeah.
He dresses up to become Clark Kent. Superman is his natural state. And it's kind of this deconstruction of this character. So I want you to think of it this way. If you sit down and look at a role-playing game, and you've ever run a game or played in a game, sure, you've had your moments of writer's block. Every game master has. You've had your moments where maybe you recycled a campaign, or maybe you played in a campaign, or two campaigns felt pretty similar to you. But if for a moment we peel back that layer of jadedness, is there anyone involved in the role-playing hobby who feels like they have told every story there is to tell, they have played in every game there is to play in? And I really doubt the answer is yes, because at least for most people I've talked to, that's what keeps drawing us back.
Yeah.
And so take it to the next step. If, in fact, we concede that we have not told every story there is to tell or experienced every game there is to play in, then that must mean they have unique qualities. Well, if they have unique qualities, that means each one draws out a new and unique subject of conversation. Because what set Game A and Game B apart from each other, whether that was rule system, setting, a particular character, social interactions amongst the players, family members disrupting the game, the snacks you're eating, whatever it was, there's all these layers to it. But if anything made Game A different from Game B, you've just come up with a new subject of something to discuss. And that's what we found over the years, that as long as we keep gaming, we keep finding new things to talk about because we keep creating and experience new things. And that's what makes this hobby great. there's only a finite number of things that I can do with a video game. But you hand me a role-playing book and some dice, and theoretically, I could play that game until the day I die. I mean, there is no hobby that gives you a better return on your investment than a role-playing game.
So a little challenge to throw out to the listeners is maybe add in a couple comments, some experiences they've had to our Facebook page or wherever about some of the experiences associated with this.
You know, for us, the reason we started this podcast was because on weekends, when we were not at church or we weren't working or we weren't playing, we were usually sitting there talking about playing. We even have two kind of one-shot situations that are getting ready to come up. And part of them I'm going to actually ask Dan a question on. But the first one being that Derek wants to run a sit-down one-shot with 8 oracles in the Pathfinder game system, where every oracle has a different mystery and different curses. But for some reason, we're all banded together as the exact same class, much like Wayne's obsession with bards.
Yeah, the barding.
But he wants to do the same thing to see what happens with that, because the Oracle is one of those very neat and detailed classes that Paizo has really put a lot of their heart and soul into, between the Advanced Player's Guide and Ultimate Magic and all these different versions that have come out. So we want to see what we can come up with if we put an entire game of them together.
There's like 10 different mysteries and just the APG.
Just the APG. Yeah. So
for the Oracle.
Our conversations about the Oracle has turned into a game, and there's a possibility that that game could turn into a actual play that the Established Facts release, mainly because we're getting ready to test out actual play on this next part that I'm asking about. We're in the middle of the archetypes series. Our 4 archetypes, in our opinion, are the fighter, the support character, the survivalist, and the caster. And any class in role-playing games, as it may be, usually fits in the Venn diagram that is those 4 classes.
One of, if not a combination of those.
And our last episode, if you listened to it or not, we had a clash that came out of it between Derek swearing a first-level wizard could beat a first-level fighter. Swearing up and down this can happen. So now we're literally going to have and record on the day of WrestleMania a fatal four-way
dance
between a character class for each archetype to see what happens.
4 men enter, 1 man leaves.
That's
right. And we want to do it at 2nd, 6th, and 12th level under the Pathfinder role-playing game systems. We don't know exactly what the details were going to be, but I got to ask you, Dan, if you put a fighter versus a rogue versus a druid versus a wizard we'll start with second level. Who's going to win?
Man, okay.
It's a great way to start.
Let me think this backwards. Obviously, the first and most critical question is who won initiative.
Right?
Pretty much.
Because if the fighter wins initiative, that's the end of the wizard right there. Because it's only going to take 1 sword swing to take that wizard down. So I would say it's really going to come down to 2 roles. 1 is going to be who wins initiative, and 2, based on who goes next. If it's a melee class, did the melee attack hit home? If it's a caster class, did the victim make their saving throw?
Yeah.
If you want, in my opinion, just kind of very randomly, just sort of guessing who would be most likely to win that matchup, I'd say fighter first with probably druid as a close second.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking
Because the wizard just playing at that level does not have the survivability, does not have the bag of tricks, and also is not going to have the feats that the fighter's going to have to take things like improved initiative. I mean, they will have a feat, so they could spend it on improved initiative. But just guessing off of that little information, I'd give it to the fighter with a close second to the druid.
I am of the opinion that the one that's going to be the closest between all 4 is the 6th level. And I know we're going to talk more about this when we summarize things.
We're doing 3 bouts. We're doing, and they're actually, each one is best 3 out of 5. So we're doing a 2nd level bout between those 4 characters, a 6th level build, and then a 12th level build.
So I'm curious, as they go up in level, there's a lot of balancing that's been done in D&D, that's been done in Pathfinder or whatever that may be. I think I'm more curious about the 12th level from you, Dan, so we don't take up all the time. Now that they're at 12th level, they've kind of reached over that peak, and in the Pathfinder Society, they are ready to retire.
Are we
where
presupposing matching gear? Does the fighter have?
Everyone has the same amount of money. Everyone has the same starting stats that can be spent as necessary, and I think this. And everyone's going to max
same
hit
race.
points.
There is
We're all
limits to like the maximum number of gold you can spend per item.
Yes, Jeremy has done an excellent job of reining the four of us that are going to be doing this in.
Because it would be ridiculous.
I think by that level, I'm now going to give it to the wizard, because the problem that I think you're going to see with the other classes is the wizard can't be killed quickly enough, which means all they've got to do is get one of their hardcore spells to stick, and they'll survive enough rounds that the dice will probably work in their favor eventually. Especially if they came into this prepared for that scenario, go after the fighter's will. If you can get him to drop on a will save, which is not going to be real hard with a fighter, and you're strong enough that if you fail the first one, you're probably going to be there for another couple rounds to keep doing it.
This is going to be exciting.
And it's because of that statement right there that I'm excited about our next episode.
Oh man!
Because Michael is
the next one,
who is not going to be our caster in the battle. Actually, Derek is going to be the caster because Derek and Don started this whole thing.
Oh man!
But Michael is our resident spellcaster. He has been doing spellcasters for quite a long time, and really he's going to kind of spotlight that.
He and I built spellcasters together. We were brothers.
Yes.
And those were our first two experiences with Spellcaster.
So I'm very intrigued to see what happens. So now we've got a third party opinion as well.
I mean, it's his opinion, so that's fine.
And the next thing that I would say is, if you're the fighter in that game, I would not make your fighter a strength con fighter. I would make your fighter probably a dex wisdom fighter, which I realize sounds so counterintuitive, but you need to get those saving throws up. Take weapon finesse, take dex, and even though it's useless to you otherwise, get your wisdom up simply so you have the best possible chance of making a will save.
Well,
instead of becoming a meerkat like we like to do.
I mean, there's obviously the biggest advantage that the fighter has at 12th level, especially and I was discovering this when I did my second level build, is as a human fighter, I have 4 feats to start with at second level.
Yes.
So, I mean, the best advantage I'm going to have is just to implement my feat spread as best as possible. Because, and I was talking to Mike. Mike is going to be playing the rogue, and Josh is going to be playing the druid, and we were having a discussion because the druid obviously gets an animal companion if they choose to take that with their nature's bond in Pathfinder. And I had the discussion with Mike that I felt like the biggest threat on the field next to me having 4 feats at second level is a druid that has 2 guys in the fray at the same time. And I was joking around with him. I said, I feel like if I were to confront the druid and go after the animal companion and just start raping face when it came to killing the druid, I feel like I would get 2 daggers in the back just as I finished off the druid from the rogue sneak attacking me.
Yeah, if the rogue's got any sense, the rogue's going to stay out of the fight.
Yeah,
and then just take the winner once they're completely spent.
Yeah,
but I think it's an interesting thing, and you see these kinds of debates all over the internet. But I think part of it's fun to have. I always find it amusing when people take it so seriously, not as you guys are, but just, when people get worked up like they tend to do on the internet, because of the fact that, these character classes really were not balanced to fight each other.
Yeah.
At least in my mind, they were balanced to be equally useful together on an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is where my somewhat weak defense of the Bard comes in. Yes, I realize the Bard is a problematic class that really doesn't encapsulate well what I think they were trying to go for in terms of feel of the class. But they all have an equal, or should at least have an equal degree of usefulness on the field. So even if one guy can't kick ass like the other guy can, that might mean he can still do things back in town or find ways around traps or whatever the case may be, where at the end of things they were equally useful, even if not equally powerful. But I find interesting, though, that when you guys, in breaking these archetypes down, you took the approach you did. Not that it's a wrong approach, but I think there's a few approaches you can take on the archetype. One is what you guys chose, which is the role of the character. The second would be, of course, the nature of the character, meaning, like, literally, who are they as a person? Is this the grizzled veteran? Is this the young upstart, whatever? And then the third being, which is, this is the one that always fascinated me the most, is the motivation of the archetype. For example, do you play to protect? Do you play to hurt? Do you play to intercept? Do you play to solve? Do you play to interact? What motivates you to pick the characters that you pick?
That was actually a big debate that we got into with our when we did our survivalist episode, was weighing the difference between a class that would be considered a survivalist style class and a character playing as if they were a survivalist. Because I think that, depending on your mentality, it doesn't matter what class you are. If you have a survival style mentality, you are a survivalist in that sense.
Right. No, absolutely.
Which is how we were able to apparently convince ourselves that a rogue could fit in both a support and survivalist, if depending on where they are, whether they are by themselves or whether or not they are there to help the rest of the party. Yeah. So, very, very interesting conversation so far on that. We've loved it. It's been some of our best work. I don't really know how to say that, but
I think we can say that.
Okay.
Definitely.
It's been some of our best episodes, and at some point, I really want to come to the defense of the poor beleaguered bard.
Derek, I'm with you. I'm not quite the partisan that Wayne is, but I think the bard has gotten an unnecessarily bad rap. And I will say, though, however, I don't like what Pathfinder did with it. I thought bardic knowledge, in particular, made them, were they powerful in the battlefield? No, they weren't. But as someone that likes being able to play a flex class, I thought the bard did a great job, because they could stand on the front line for a few rounds, they could fall back and throw some damage, they could do some healing, and when you're back in town, they have at least a chance, at least a roll of knowing anything.
And that WTF skill.
If you want,
got two chances to make one knowledge check. You know what I mean?
Well, if you want the ability, as it was known, the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot skill, as we like to call it, the
nice,
the bardic knowledge from 3.5. If you want that type of ability, look at the Oracle with the lore mystery.
Yes, I actually played an Oracle with the lore mystery in a Pathfinder game not that long ago.
Oh my gosh,
awesome.
That's awesome.
Higher power, once they get that ability to, here, I'm gonna sit here for 6 seconds and then add 20 to my knowledge roll.
I cast Google.
I cast Google.
My wife played one for an entire, was it a year?
Yes,
played it for a
year.
year.
Yeah.
And she was not our most helpful person on the battlefield, but when it came to, we've got to solve a puzzle. Well, how about this? And she just trances off for a few seconds and then spits out all the information we need. Yeah. It's really, that was my thought with it too. So
Open me.
All right. Do we have any last-minute plugs before we get into our facts?
Yes.
Go for it.
First of all, Dan, while we have you on here, this podcast would not have occurred without Fear the Boot. So we want to thank you.
Most definitely.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to hear that. Because you guys have a great show, so
well, thank you.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to make sure that we let you know that we do appreciate the ground that you have set before us, and you've set it for a number of different podcasts. So I just want to give you our thanks for doing that and continuing to do that. Also, like you said at the beginning, Fear the Con is coming up in May.
Yeah, that was in St. Louis County.
St. Louis County. It's the technical name of the area is Maryland Heights. Maryland, just like the state, right. And then Heights. But it's going to be a little bit west of St. Louis City.
It's just a suburb, isn't it?
It's a suburb of St. Louis City. So it's like St. Louis except without the crime. So
it's actually
nice.
It's a nice area. I mean, it's Josh has been to it once. I think last year was your first.
Yes, Deb and I, it was our first year last year, and that's why we're making it a point to take the weekend to go again this year.
I'm trying to get wifely approval to go.
Yeah,
this
you
year.
really should.
Got 2 kids to worry about.
Yeah.
2 kids, and she's got to get to work. So,
But yeah, I've been there since Fear the Con Zero, and I missed 1 year, but it's always a good con to go to. It's a small con, but it's really amazing. And I will be running the charity event.
For
there.
puppies that got hurt while defending America. The single most guilt-laden charity I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, and for our listeners who can't see, Derek is
15
red.
shades of red right now.
that's right. Not 50 shades, 15.
15.
No,
okay.
I haven't gotten
not
that
great.
X-rated.
Shades of red.
But yes, there are two organizations: Retired Military Working Dog Assistance Organization, which brings home military dogs who've been deployed and then finds them good homes to live out the rest of their years, and then Operation
and also the charity trophy for longest charity name
Right?
of all time.
That's like SHIELD. They need to work on that acronym.
Seriously. And then there's Operation Freedom Paws, which pairs up what's it called, assistance dogs with veterans that come home and like need I don't want to put it this way, but like psychological assistance, that sort of thing. So it's a good companion to help them through their troubles and that sort of thing. So all the money that I'm collecting at Fear the Con will be evenly divided between those two organizations, and I'm running a raffle there where it's $10 a ticket, and I put together the ultimate gamer package that where it's like, what can I think of? It's like a lunch bag. It's like everything that could fit into the bag of holding, the Dragon Scale bag of holding from ThinkGeek, and so there's a complete list that we will put out there.
Yeah, and it's a great
podcast-
charity. Great charities, we fully support these. These are great things to give to, and I intend to give to it myself. We make jokes about it being such a gut-wrenching sort of tear-jerking charity, but that doesn't change the reality of the fact that this is a great cause.
And
So.
unlike the postcards contest, keep in mind all podcast hosts are eligible for this charity. So put your money in and get there
right.
at the con.
Yes.
Do it.
You have to be at the con to be able to actually win the prizes. There are going to be 2 full sets of packages, and there are at least 20 items in there with dice and a lunch bag which has nom 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 on it.
So I got to ask you, when are you drawing? Are you going to draw one on Friday and one on Saturday, or both of them on Saturday?
Both of them on Saturday.
Okay, well, make sure you guys are at least
So you're
there
at least there on
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah.
If you're at least there on Saturday, you can get in.
Mm-hmm. So,
But even if you're not going to be there on Saturday, please do help.
Yes.
yes, and we'll be posting the links to these really good charities out there. So
I think that's good for me.
Is that everything?
What you got there, Don?
Well, all right. So on the last episode of the Established Facts, it was established that though you may travel in a party of 8, 9, or 10, much like the Highlander, there can be only one. And in this episode of the Established Facts, it's a little bit more straightforward, but the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem.
wow.
That's it. I got nothing.
Yeah, you really do.
I got nothing.
I'm pretty sure I just witnessed a Groner foul.
That's
just
right.
what just happened.
Oh, yeah.
But Don, you do have a problem.
I do have a problem.
True.
And thank you very much, Dan, for joining
Yes,
us.
thank you again, Dan.
Well,
Yes.
thank you guys as well. I'm happy to be on the first and only podcast I've ever heard of that has a TLDR version at the end.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye,
Bye.
whatever. Please visit us at www.theestablishedfacts.com and our Facebook page, facebook.com/theestablishedfacts. If you would like to support us by buying some merchandise, visit cafepress.com/castingrobot.